that events like this start making me perhaps feel a little bit of age. I remember when I came back in 2012, my first season back as an assistant coach, the 2002 Big Ten championship team was honored in between quarters in the first half of I believe it was the Northern Iowa game. And that was the first time it dawned on me that maybe some of these things were a little bit longer ago than I remember, but I'm really excited to be representing that football team in front of you guys today and just share a little bit of my recollection of the season. I thought a lot about what I wanted to say about that year and try to squeeze it into about 5 minutes so I don't bore anyone, but I think as anybody that's been a part of something significant, a team accomplishment knows, it's just very difficult to mine the words to express adequately the impact and the lasting impression it's made on my life. Interestingly enough, coming through the Hall of Fame, you're greeted by the Hall of Fame members as you walk in. You see a lot of memorabilia and team pictures from years past, and I just think history has an interesting way of polishing the past. In the present, we tend to polish it, and we're going to honor the 2014 for winning a Big Ten championship, beating LSU in the Capital One Bowl. But certainly there was a little more that went into it. And when I recall that year, I think you have to start with the adversity that began in the offseason. We lost Jeffrey Parker, who was the late Norm Parker's son. I believe that was in February, March, April, somewhere in there. And so things didn't get off to a great start in 2004. He was an integral part of the program. And obviously that was very tough for the Parker family, but it was a loss felt by the entire University of Iowa football team. I don't recall the exact expectations going into that season, but we were coming off a very successful 2-year run. I believe we'd won 21 or 22 games in 2 years, something like that. And certainly we're expected to continue that. We did not get off to the best start. We beat Iowa State, we beat Kent State, and then we went down to Tempe, Arizona, and got throttled. And I've been a part of a lot of butt whippings in my day. That was right up there with about any of them. In fact, a personal anecdote, I remember it being so bad. We scored at the end of the game. It was 44-0, and it probably wasn't that close. I think we managed about 40 yards of total offense or something like that. It was a rough night. And they punt at the end of the game. Walter Bellius was our punt returner, and he ends up going in and scoring from, 60 yards out. It took forever. And I think when he scored, there was about 10 seconds left on the game clock. And my recollection is watching that punt return, wishing he would go down so we could get on the plane faster. Because I felt like we had been so thoroughly beat that 7 points was really not going to make an impact, and it did not. But one thing that game did is I think it reset our focus, it reset our football team, and unfortunately we had to learn a tough lesson that night. Next week we went to Michigan. We're a little more competitive, but didn't win the football game. So we're sitting at 2-2. Coming out of our first 4 ball games, 1 game into the Big Ten season. And I think as a lot of you guys can attest, certainly when you're 2-2 coming out of September, there's not a ton of optimism surrounding the program. And we were probably getting ready for basketball season at that point. But like any good team I've been around, the thing that made that team special, it's not great players, it's not great coaching, and it certainly is not luck. It's very simple. There was a grit, there was a determination, there was a togetherness, and a lot of talk about collaboration today. That's what makes any great team. And the thing that made that team special is the ability to ignore the noise, to separate what was important from what was not, to put blinders on, and that football team just worried about whatever was in front of it, coming out of Tempe, Arizona. Because I think maybe we worried about some things that weren't in front of us down in the desert, and got what we deserved. So each week we were able to build on that. I know we came back home. We beat Michigan State the week after Michigan, and beat them pretty good. And I don't remember who was favored in that game or not. I'm sure we were underdogs. Actually, I think the head coach still uses that. I believe we were actually underdogs in almost every game we played that year, remarkably. But we throttled them pretty good. Unfortunately, we lost another running back. And by the time we got to the Ohio State game, we were down to our 5th string running back, a guy named Sam Brownlee from Titletown, Emmitsburg, Iowa. He played very well for us that year. Didn't rush for a lot of yards, but never turned the ball over. And we were able to just build on it 1 week at a time, and it didn't really matter what happened. I look back at our numbers this morning. There were a lot of offensive numbers that would probably get me fired today. But fortunately, we just stuck to the old school formula of playing great defense. We had a tremendous defense that year. I know some of those guys will be back in the fall. We played really good on special teams and change field position. Probably our best offensive weapon was a guy named David Bradley, who was an excellent punter for us. And then, most importantly, on both sides of the ball and in the special teams phase, we limited mistakes and we didn't turn the ball over and we weren't penalized. And ultimately, that allowed us to really beat some teams that maybe we shouldn't have beaten. But that team really adhered to the thought that there is no big picture. There's only what's in front of you. Taking it one step at a time, finding a way to win. And so for me, I mentioned the Arizona State memory, but just when I think about it personally, and I know that this is going to be a tremendous event when we get to August here, where some of the guys are able to come back and really shed some light on what that season meant to them on a personal level. For me, I think of a couple things, but very vividly in my memory, I remember beating Ohio State at home in October. And I believe the score was 30-7. And I remember it vividly because the next year they returned the favor, and the score was exactly 30-7. It could have probably been about 100-7 the next year. But Coach Tressel was very nice. But that year we beat them 30-7 at home, and that was the last game that my grandfather ever saw us play. And he hung on for that game. He actually died that evening. And we buried him the next Friday before the Penn State game. And then we beat Penn State in a barn burner, 6-4. We took a very controversial safety at the end of the game. In fact, there's great footage of one of the ESPN commentators very much second-guessing that decision immediately before they threw an interception and sealed the game for us. So it's one of those rare moments in coaching where you actually look a little bit smarter than you are. But that was a great moment, winning the Big Ten championship at home against Wisconsin, what became the de facto Big Ten championship game. Luckily for us, Michigan had lost to Ohio State earlier that day, and it set the stage. It was an evening kickoff. I think it was like a 4:30 kickoff. We were playing Wisconsin at home, and we were not favored in that game. I know that for a fact. They had an excellent football team that year. Close game in the first half. Made a couple early mistakes. Jim Leonard, who's now the defensive coordinator of Wisconsin, intercepted a ball on our sideline, first or second drive that I'm pretty sure Drew threw directly to him. We were able to overcome some of those things, hit a big play at the end of the first half to go take the lead, and then we just never looked back, and it was kind of storybook from there. But winning a Big Ten championship in Kinnick Stadium with our fans, getting a chance to celebrate in the postgame, that was a great moment. I'll never forget being in that locker room and the feeling that we had in there. And then obviously the bowl game was tremendous. A lot of history has been revisited, has become revisionist, but an interesting thing about that football game is we basically controlled the football game for about 58 minutes against all odds. We were a little bit outgunned, but we got after those guys for about 58 minutes pretty good, and then for 2 minutes, it was really bad for us. Really bad for us. They were able to take the lead, but we did get the football back. If you go back and you look at that thing from a coaching perspective, we had a great opportunity at the end of the game, but we had some miscommunication. One thing led to another, and we mismanaged the clock about as bad as any football team can mismanage the clock. But we were bailed out by Warren and Drew on a tremendous play. And that's just a memory that you'll have your whole life, is celebrating that play in that moment. And unfortunately, the way that season was, that was pretty indicative of who we were. We won a lot of close games. It wasn't always pretty, but we found a way to do it. And when you look back on that 15 years later, it's a little bit sobering and very humbling to have been a part of something like that. And so I know our football team, speaking for the 2014, we couldn't be more excited to be a part of this event. We are feeling a little bit older because now we're being recognized at things like this. To us, I wake up and I still see the same 21-year-old guy in the mirror, but apparently no one else does. So again, thanks to Josh, thanks to everybody in the committee, and we just, we're excited about this fall. Obviously, it's a football program. Unfortunately, I won't be able to partake in any of the festivities. We'll be getting ready to play Miami of Ohio, but I know a lot of my former teammates are really excited about getting back here and being a part of it. So thank you guys very much.